race-crossed individuals worldwide, but entire foreign people, that is, the so-called colored ones. Later that same year, using IBM punch card techniques, Fisher began a national anthropological survey in Germany to locate and identify mainly the 600,000 German Jews. German officials stated, "In this way it is hoped to find new solutions about the appearance of certain signs of degeneration, especially distribution of hereditary pathological attributes." The project was funded by the Rockefeller Foundation. By 1933, IBM had adapted the technology used in the Jamaica study for general use by Hitler's Reich, and in 1934 IBM opened a $1 million factory in Berlin. At the factory opening, the manager of the German subsidiary, Willy Heidinger, standing next to a representative of T.J. Watson, the president of IBM, emotionally declared that population statistics were key to eradicating the unhealthy, inferior segments of German society. IBM custom-designed the systems that created national identification card files for people designated as unfit and helped locate European Jews and other undesirables. The punch card programs enabled the Nazis to trace family trees, index bank accounts and other property, organize eugenic campaigns, and even manage extermination in death camps. The punch cards the SS Race Office used were almost identical to those used in the Jamaica study. As Black has stated, "With IBM as a partner, the Hitler regime was able to substantially automate and accelerate all 6 phases of the 12-year Holocaust: identification, exclusion, confiscation, ghettoization, deportation, and even extermination. There was an IBM customer site in every concentration camp." Indeed, IBM data processing became the key to Nazi persecution of unfit people and races. It should not be forgotten that IBM generated massive profits as it took over the organization and systemization of the Nazi eugenics programs. IBM New York understood from the beginning in 1933 that it was courting and doing business with the upper echelon of the Nazi Party. The company leveraged its Nazi Party connections to continuously enhance its business relationship with Hitler's Reich in Germany and throughout Nazi-dominated Europe. IBM's U.S. top officials were aware of what was happening during the 12-year reign of the Third Reich and constantly monitored the subsidiary activities in Germany and Geneva. The company owner, Thomas Watson, was a highly decorated businessman in the United States and was a financial supporter and close consultant of President Roosevelt. However, his business interests in Nazi Germany were becoming extremely profitable, and he was very sympathetic to the Nazi racist goals. He was a staunch supporter of both Mussolini and Hitler, and although he was not particularly driven by fascism, he recognized its profitability. As Black has stated, Thomas Watson and IBM had separately and jointly spent decades making money any way they could. To a supranational, making money is equal parts commercial Darwinism, corporate ecclesiastics, dynamic chauvinism, and solipsistic greed. Many other U.S. companies, while serving the U.S. war effort, also contributed to Nazi Germany immediately before and during World War II. These companies included banks, merchants of diamonds and other raw materials, automobile makers, armaments and machinery manufacturers, and telecommunication, filmmaking, oil, chemical, drug, and food companies. Although we cannot assume that the executives and owners of all of these companies were eugenicists, we know that some of them, such as Ford, Rockefeller, Carnegie, and some of the IBM executives, were. Most likely others were more interested in making a profit than in politics or human rights. As Charles Hyam stated in his book Trading with the Enemy, A number of financial and industrial figures of World War II and several members of the government served the cause of money before the cause of patriotism. While aiding the United States war effort, they also aided Nazi Germany's. As Hyam has pointed out, a number of major American corporate leaders formed interlocking directorates and financial connections with Nazi corporations, including I.G. Farben, the massive Nazi industrial trust that was critical to the development of the German war machine leading up to World War II and that helped create Auschwitz. In fact, Henry Ford merged his German assets with the I.G. Farben chemical cartel in Germany. I.G. Farben had business contracts with companies around the world, including Standard Oil, DuPont, Alcoa, Bayer, and Dow Chemical. Hyam labeled this interconnected group of international corporate giants the Fraternity. These included First National Bank, affiliated with J.P. Morgan, National City Bank, and Rockefeller's Chase National Bank, as mentioned previously. These banks had connections with Hitler's Reichsbank and the Bank for International Settlements of Switzerland. For example, in 1944, T.H. McKittrick, the American president of the bank, held an annual meeting of bankers from Germany, Japan, Italy, Britain, and America to discuss millions of dollars worth of gold that had been sent to the bank by the Nazi government for use by Nazi leaders during and after the war. McKittrick, a Nazi supporter, was enamored of both Hitler and Mussolini, and interestingly, like many of the eugenicists of the time, was a 1911 graduate of Harvard. The gold had been looted from European national banks after German takeovers, or was Reichsbank gold that had been melted down from teeth fillings, eyeglass frames, cigarette cases and lighters, and wedding rings of murdered hospital and concentration camp victims. In 1943 and 1944, members of Congress and the Senate called for an investigation of the bank and its American president because 1. The bank was being used to further the war efforts of the Nazis, and 2. American money was still flowing into the bank. Essentially, the Bank for International Settlements was aiding and abetting the enemy. The U.S. government called for a liquidation of the bank, but it quietly ignored the American resolution. After World War II, the Bank for International Settlements re-emerged as the main clearinghouse for European currencies. J.P. Morgan and Union Bank of New York were owned by Brown Brothers and the Harriman family. Union Bank was intimately linked to the German industrial empire of steel magnate Fritz Thyssen, who had helped Hitler rise to power. The bank was managed by Prescott Bush, father and grandfather of the 2 Bush presidents. Prescott Bush was a strong supporter of Hitler, funneled money to him through Thyssen, and made considerable profits in dealing with Nazi Germany. Shortly before the war, the Nazi government, through Chase National Bank, offered Nazis in America the opportunity to buy German currency, Deutsche Marks, with dollars at a discount. Investors were told that the money would be used for Nazi interests, and that the German marks would greatly increase in value after victory in the impending war. The bankers agreed that special attention should be focused on shopkeepers, factory workers, and others with little money but great potential for Germany. They should be able-bodied young men and women of pure Aryan stock. The fraternity also included Standard Oil, Davis Oil Company, Texas Company, Texaco, Ford Motor Company, General Motors, and Chrysler. In fact, GM brought mass productions of automobiles to the Reich, converting it from a horse-drawn threat to a motorized powerhouse. GM also built thousands of bombers and jet propulsion systems for the Luftwaffe at the same time that it was producing aircraft engines for the U.S. Army. Germany obtained raw materials such as rubber and non-ferrous metals through the American Ford Company, and Ford Werke was instrumental in German armament production after the United States entered the war, with full knowledge of its American executives. When U.S. troops landed in Normandy in 1944 and captured German trucks, they were amazed to discover that the engines were powered by GM and Ford. The American conglomerate International Telephone and Telegraph helped Hitler improve his communication systems and develop bombs that were dropped on Britain and on U.S. troops. The fraternity also included New York diamond merchants, who smuggled commercial and industrial diamonds to Germany through South America. Other well-known American companies with strong interconnections with Nazi Germany were DuPont, Union Carbide, Westinghouse, General Electric, Gillette, Goodrich, Singer, Eastman Kodak, and Coca-Cola. American companies profited greatly by dealing with Nazi Germany because Hitler had cut labor costs tremendously. He had dissolved labor unions and had thrown many communist and socialist sympathizers and left-wing liberal supporters, political prisoners, into prisons and concentration camps, thus emasculating the German working class. German workers were little more than serfs, forbidden not only to strike but to change jobs, driven to work harder and faster while their wages were deliberately set quite low. Companies in Nazi Germany also used prisoners as laborers, forced laborers or Fremdarbeiter, who were supervised directly by the Gestapo. Coca-Cola, Ford, and GM used these laborers. Because of these tactics, wages declined rapidly and profits increased precipitously, even during the Great Depression. The war was so profitable to many of these companies that a number of their executives thought that the longer the war lasted, the better. The fraternity had set itself up to maintain financial, industrial, and political autonomy no matter who won the war. The American ambassador to Germany, William E. Dodd, was aware of the connections between American businessmen and other wealthy Americans and Nazi Germany. In 1937 he wrote to President Roosevelt, "A clique of U.S. industrialists is hell-bent to bring a fascist state to supplant our democratic government, and is working closely with the fascist regime in Germany and Italy. I have had plenty of opportunity in my post in Berlin to witness how close some of our American ruling families are to the Nazi regime. Certain American industrialists had a great deal to do with bringing fascist regimes into being in both Germany and Italy. They extended aid to help fascism occupy the seat of power, and they are helping to keep them there." It appears that the goal of many of these wealthy and powerful individuals was to maximize profits by supplying both sides with materials to conduct the war. Did the racial hatred of Hitler bother these industrialists and businessmen? Apparently not much, if at all. After all, racism against non-whites remained systematic throughout the U.S., and anti-Semitism was rife in the corporate class. The anti-Semitism of corporate America soon evolved into anti-socialism, anti-Marxism, and anti-communism. Many American businessmen denounced Roosevelt's New Deal as socialistic. Anti-Semites of corporate America considered Roosevelt to be crypto-communist and an agent of Jewish interests, and his New Deal was vilified as the Jew Deal. As Powell's has emphasized, many of the owners and managers of American corporations admired the Third Reich because unconditional collaboration with Hitler made it possible for them to make profits like never before. As Hayem has noted, when it was clear that Germany was losing the war, the businessmen became notably more loyal. Then, when war was over, the survivors pushed into Germany, protected their assets, restored Nazi friends to high office, helped provoke the Cold War, and ensured the permanent future of the fraternity.